right, everybody, welcome to the Rock Consultant weekly webinar for the emergency medical services space. My name is Josh Gregory, and I am the Vice President of Education here at Rock Consultant. If you've never met us before, our team ran one of the largest FedEx operations in the country, has had a decade of experience valuing, selling, and consulting on different logistics businesses. And so the goal of these webinars is to help all of you understand the opportunity that comes with owning a business in the EMS industry. And so we're here for you to learn everything you can about this industry, to ask questions if you have them, and find the best way to accelerate your journey into the industry if you do decide this is the right fit for you. If you're here live or if you're watching on YouTube, you can always send us questions. Obviously, if you're here live, you can ask them in the Q&A button at the bottom of the window. But if you're watching at a later time, you can always reach out to us at info@routeconsultant.com. Whatever your questions are, whether it's for me or Hans, we're always happy to answer them. Now, if you've been on any of ours, a lot of the content that we talk about here and the advice that we offer is really geared and targeted on the non-emergency side of this industry. But, don't forget, you are working with clients that could very well have real emergencies. So what we wanted to do today is to go over how you handle when these true medical emergencies occur, what to do, what not to do, and everything else that's involved with these really sensitive and intense situations often. So Hans Fakir and I will be on today to talk through it all. And again, if you have not met Hans, he is on and he's been here all these past few webinars, for months this year. He has a long history in the industry, and he's operated these businesses. He does mentorship, helping others get into this business for the first time. And so Hans, if you want to go ahead and come on and say hello, and we'll get started.
Hey, Josh, how are you as always?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Yes,
Perfect.
doing great.
So this conversation actually came up because you and I were talking earlier, and it's actually a situation that you just dealt with. So can you kind of take us through what happened here and kind of talk us through what occurred with you, and then we'll get into how you handle these for any contractor.
Yeah, definitely. This past weekend actually follows a weekend. I was working a particular event, and it was an event almost for just a group of people, special needs, something like that. It's a similar event, something like that. So we were on the field, and one of the people actually passed out. So they called 911 and they called us. We used walkie-talkies. I was on a different side of the field. They called us over and said, "Hey," one of my MTs called me and said, "Hey, they're calling for us to be on the field. Somebody has fallen." So at that point, Josh, we don't understand what happened. We don't know the severity. They just said someone fell. And in this environment or that environment, it was very hot. It could have been a possible heat stroke. We deal with a lot of these events where people really need something as simple as just an ice pack, maybe some fluids. It's usually nothing very severe. But when we got there, we noticed that the guy was not responsive. We tried doing a couple of medical procedures like a sternum rub. We checked his vitals, and it was just a situation that looked very urgent, to say the least, right? So at that moment, everything goes into action. I told him to call 911. I told him to bring the ambulance onto the football field or the track and field. And from there, we proceeded to take the patient, put him onto a golf cart because the ambulance, they said they couldn't get the ambulance into the field. So we had to do the next best thing. Let's get him on a golf cart. Let's get the golf cart to the ambulance because it was going to be too far to carry this person, to the ambulance. Thank God they were able to bring the ambulance onto the football field, and we were able to take the stretcher out, put him onto the stretcher, and put him in the back of the stretcher and start assessing his vitals. At that point, I'm asking the gentleman who called 911, "Hey, what did they say their ETA was?" He said it's going to be like between 10 and 15 minutes. I asked my EMT, since she was familiar with the area, "Where's the nearest hospital?" She told me the nearest hospital. I put it on my GPS. It was 8 minutes away. At that point, I made a judgment call. I said, "Hey, we gotta go." This, unfortunately, it wasn't a just a heat exhaustion. And patient illnesses became more severe. but our job was to really transport him to the hospital. We went code three, which is lights and sirens, as fast as we could. We got him to a cardiac trauma center, and we transported the patient, transferred his care to the doctor, explained to him what happened. We had to start doing CPR. We had to do life-saving procedures. And then once we transferred his care to the hospital, they took over. And actually, there were some EMTs that were parked in the EMS ambulance parking. They seen us backing up with lights and sirens. And I rolled down my window. They was like, "Hey, do you guys need help?" And I said, "Yeah." So by the time I opened the back doors to my ambulance, they jumped in, started doing chest compressions. We worked as a team, and we got the patient inside.
Got it. Yeah, and you know, in times like that, it's basically something where you just have to jump in and you kind of make that decision. And we'll talk about that because sometimes those judgment calls do come up. But before we get there, if you're in the non-emergency space, what should your normal protocol be in one of these situations if there is an emergency outside of where you have to make a judgment call?
That's a great question. I think this is like a reality check or wake up call for even me,
Yeah.
because like you just said, Josh, we're in a non-emergency space. So this is a rarity. I don't want anyone to think that, oh my God, I'm actually going to have someone's lives in my hands. Yes, you are. But for the most part, guys and girls, we take care of people that are in pretty stable condition and they're going to routine doctor's appointments. This was an actual outside event that we volunteered to do for a particular school. So this was definitely, again, an eye opener. But to me, it made me reiterate to myself the procedures that we're going to talk about, which is number one is always call 911, right? But number two is most importantly, check your truck off. If you are even assisting another company before you decide to go to that event or pick up a patient, you want to do your own accountability check. You want to know not only do they have all the supplies that are licensed by the state, but you're familiar with where those supplies are located, right? So knowing that it's going to be critical to saving that person's life, because when it comes to emergencies like that, and somebody might go into cardiac arrest, drowning emergencies, cardiac arrest emergencies, everything's about how quickly you can get to them and how quickly you can start administering care. And every second is so valuable. So that's one of the things I would tell people is no, always check off your truck, but always know, like have an emergency plan in place. So I would never do that again without, it was the volunteer thing. It was like, hey, I'm just going to help. And I wasn't on the ambulance. I was just going there to watch the activities and kind of supervise. But again, you want to know that you have contingency plans. Who's the point of contact for this event? Where's the nearest hospital? Can EMS have a golf cart for us? There's no reason why we should have to run again because time is everything to a person that fell, right? Or an emergency. So you want to make sure that those things are definitely in place before you do anything, right? And that's even before you even accept the event. Who's the point of contact? What are your contingency plans for the event coordinator? Is there going to be a medical doctor on staff? Like, who am I going to be working with? And if this happens, let's do a role play and let's run through a scenario. So that way we know everybody's roles and everybody knows what to do.
Yeah. And I think the thing, if you're doing an event or any kind of thing where it's not your typical routes and patients that you're working with, the people who are running the event, their medical emergency plan is that they hired you. They don't think about it past that. They're like, oh, I've got somebody to handle it. And so if you think about it that way, then any question or gap that you have in your own mind of how would I handle if something like this went wrong at this particular event, they probably haven't thought about. So when you're thinking through your own game plan, kind of validate and ask those questions of the event coordinator of like, hey, has someone checked about any way to transport in and out of this area? I have an ambulance, but if my ambulance can't get there, then we've got a problem. So those types of things are the types of things that is, like you said, this isn't an every time situation. This is going to be pretty rare that you deal with one of these, but you don't plan for perfect case scenarios. You plan for what the bad things that could happen.
Yes, I was a firefighter for 9 years, and every month or every day at the fire department, we had fire training. Even though we probably fought one fire a year and we really did most EMS stuff, but we prepared, how I say, prepared for the storm. Even though it's not storm season, you get the shutters, you get everything that you have to get, and that you want to apply that same mentality, that same philosophy with your EMS company. You know, like we did say, it's a rarity, but just be prepared because one situation can make or break your company, right? The way you handle it, whether it's a positive or good outcome, can speak volumes for your reputation within the EMS community. You know, and in that situation, yes, you're not thinking about those things. You're definitely thinking about the patient's family, their life. But being prepared is thinking about those things.
Yeah, because
So,
exactly like what you said, a lot of times it's a matter of seconds, not minutes or hours. And so if you've planned properly, you could be the differentiator. So, sometimes you are going to have to make judgment calls like what just happened to you this weekend. So if you are in a situation where you have to handle an emergency, what are the most important things to do and be prepared for to control that situation?
I would tell anyone that owns an EMS company and you're at the scene or you delegate to someone that's going to be a medic or EMT on the scene, the first thing I would tell them is be prepared to take control, right? In every situation, someone that's probably not even medically inclined wants to take control, right? Because it's a loved one, it's a friend, it's somebody that they know. And at that split second, they probably think they know more than you on what's right for the patient, right? So be prepared to take control and then be prepared to delegate, right? Hey, Josh, I need you to call 911. Brent, I need you to go get the ambulance. I'm going to start CPR. Somebody go get the AED. Like those procedures you have in place and practice them over and over with your employees. You'll never practice saving someone's life too much. You
Yeah.
know, so in a situation like that again, I would definitely be prepared to be in control. I would be prepared to delegate, and I would understand and know where the nearest and most appropriate facility. And the reason I say that is one thing that we practice at the fire department is, Josh, if you broke your leg, I'm not taking you to a cardiac center. Sometimes people will just be in such a rush to take someone to the nearest hospital, and now that patient has to get transported to a cardiac center. So, what I would advise every owner of an ambulance company to do, and this is what I do, I either have a book that has all the hospitals in my area or in my city and what they specialize in, so my employees will have a reference guide. If someone's having a cardiac event, we're going to take them to Piedmont. If someone's having a stroke event, I'm taking them Piedmont Henry. We know these things, and we're going to make sure that we're not, again, delaying transport or delaying care.
I think
You know,
a important point is if you have, let's say it's an employee that's driving and you're not in the vehicle and this type of emergency happens, do you train well enough where the employees have full, decision making on if they should transport or not, or do they always call you first?
yes, no. First, they're delaying time. I'm trying to teach them not to delay time. The first thing my employees always should do before calling me is call 911,
Right.
right? You're trained. I hired you because you're an EMT. You know what you're doing. I need you to make sure that you do what you've been trained to do. Call 911. And another thing that you have control over is your means of egress. Like you said before, you can control your escape route. You can control that with any event. And the one thing that I want people to realize is when you own an EMS company and someone's soliciting your services, you have to control the narrative. And if they don't want you to, let's say, hey, we don't want you to park here because it doesn't look good for the crowd. Well, unfortunately, I won't be able to do this event for you,
Yeah.
right? Because you're not risking your company's license, somebody's life because of aesthetics or convenience. Your job is to be ready at all times. So that's another thing you want to control. You want to control the narrative on what happens if there's an emergency. Because, like you said before, Josh, they're looking to you for that guidance,
Mhm.
right? And so, even in this situation where we elected to do this event, we spoke to the lady prior and we asked her, we said, we need one golf cart. And she said, well, we only have two and we're going to use it for. I should have said, well, we can't do this,
Yeah.
right? Even though they got the golf cart to us quickly, but could you imagine if we got to the patient without running through a football field
Yep.
and we just got to the patient on a golf cart? So again, control the narrative. That's one thing that you can't compromise. You know, you've trained for it, you prepared for it. There's no reason to do all that and let someone say, well, don't do it this way, right? Because of the inconvenience it might cause to the crowd or the athletes. That's what you're there for, to help the crowd and the athletes,
Yeah.
right? And so you want to be prepared for that. So, you know, the benefits of this, and I know this is a very serious matter is, but you know, the after effect is it can weigh very well for you if you prepare, right? Because everybody wants to be associated with a company that's professional and prepared, right? And so I know in a time like this, you don't want to look at really the human side doesn't want to look at the benefits of it for your business, but you can't help it, right? You don't go into it doing that. Like if I do this right, this is going to happen. But this is just an effect of that. This is the effect of you being ready. That, you know, it will help you in so many ways. And not only just business, your employees will respect you more. They'll look at you as someone who didn't put their license at risk because you were ready. You had a contingency plan. You had the proper SOPs to handle that emergency. I know I just went off to the left. I don't know if I answered your question.
Oh, that's completely right. Yeah, because I think you're 100% right that you're not doing this to have some kind of business benefit. But if your goal, and your goal should be, as any kind of medical professional, to protect and build your business in a way where you're protecting your clients and optimizing the outcomes for them, because the trust and the success of your business comes from how well you can take care of your patients. And, people get into this space because they want to be able to help others. They want to find a way to, they may not be a doctor, but they can find a way to enter this space and still enable better health outcomes for people. And so if that's the goal and kind of the North Star of your business, then you should always want to prepare. You should always want to have everything in place and ask all the right questions so that if something like this does occur, you're as ready as you can be to have the best possible outcome that you can. And if you are ready and you do have the best possible outcome, then it typically will benefit your business. Where exactly like what you're saying, it's not necessarily the goal, but building a good business where you're protecting patients means other people want to work with you because you're a business that protects patients. So you keep your North Star the same of running a safe business that's prepared. And yes, it will benefit you because there's a lot of trust that comes in this business with people trusting their lives and their families' lives with you. And you want to always build that trust.
Yep, and that's why you and I, we always talk to people. We've had several conversations about the importance of the owner just going to EMT school or being an EMR, right? That's another aspect of incidents that you can control because now the more you know, the more you can help, right? Imagine just being an owner and not having any EMS knowledge, right? In the state of New Jersey right now, you could become an EMR in one day, in Georgia, 2 weeks, in Chicago, 2 weeks. So at minimum, you want to know about any business you invest in, any business you own, right? I own a gourmet grilled cheese restaurant. I know how to make grilled cheese sandwiches. I want to be able to help my employees do the best they can. And by even being able to, I only drove the other day. My employee was in the back doing CPR. But because I'm an EMT, that allowed me legally to drive. That's another thing that you can control as well. You know, how much you know and how much you can contribute.
Right. So if one of these situations does occur, and you actually step in to help with the emergency, is there any kind of liability or anything to worry about there for your business? And what are the things to kind of do to protect yourself in those scenarios?
Yeah. Thank God that the insurance that most states ask or require will cover it. In Georgia, it's $1 million to $3 million, death and, the liability insurance. So I'm never concerned about that as an owner, like, hey, I'm going to get sued or this and that. My thing is, at the end of the day, and this is what we did, and I think you and I spoke about this earlier. My employee and I reviewed our steps over and over. Hey, what could we have done wrong? What could we have done differently? I'm sorry. Was there anything that we did that we could have done better? We're running through the scenario again. I think the liability issue is always a genuine concern, right? Because nobody wants to get sued. But we do have insurances in place to take care of that. But again, the reputation comes out, your your premiums go up, you might lose an employee. There's a lot of adverse effects that can happen. But from the financial aspect, we're pretty well protected, you know, um, uh, from that spot, you know.
And what are the types of documentation that you typically will put together for yourself, kind of recording what happened so that it's a clear story for any kind of agency or a hospital?
Yeah. So, typically you would need a PCR, which is a patient care report, right? But a care report is something we do every day. Every time we transport a patient, we're doing a patient care report. But I, I did, I need to mention one other thing. We need an incident report. This is one of those cases where it wasn't just a typical transportation. So what do we need to do? Hey, upon arrival, I found Brent doing this, this, and this, breathing agonally, laying face down, laying in a supine position, pulse was this, this was this. We immediately called for 911. And your PCR and your incident report can't mirror each other. But again, when you're thinking of something like this that's severe, that can be someone's life or death, just always think worst case scenario, right? Maybe the police might call you and say, hey, I need an incident report on this person because they passed away. The hospital's going to call you because they definitely don't want liability. So they're going to say, what were the procedures that you did to make sure that when we got them, he or she had the best chance of surviving? So having your incident report, having a which is your incident report for your files, having a PCR for Medicare, Medicaid, and the state, but also giving the transferring hospital a good report, right? Which is his vitals, his O2 saturation, his breathing, just the ABCs, and what was done. Was there any, we don't do meds, but were there any meds? Did you transfer this patient to another 911 agency? So the main thing is an incident report and a patient care report, which your employee should do, and you should just review it and initial it and sign off on it.
Yeah. It's one of those things where you just want to be really clear on the story and kind of dot your I's, cross your T's. It's also something where the more you can point to having the right prior training in place, so anything in your handbook or any kind of training documents that you use when you onboarded your employee that you can point back to of saying, we followed the standard procedures outlined in our handbook or outlined here. Those all go a long way to show we prepared, we planned, we followed this procedure, and we did everything we could. And it comes back to what you've talked about multiple times, which is just having the right plan and really doing everything you can to be prepared for whatever could happen is the best way to protect yourself from that thing eventually happening.
Yeah, one thing that I do, and I'm going to actually get back into practicing, is every person that works for you has a certain level that they're credentialed at, right? So your EMTs, your EMTAs, and your medics. In every state, they have a scope of practice for every level. Make sure your employees know what their scope of practice is and they're not trying to do anything outside of that. That can also save you on liability because if you're an EMTB, then you're not allowed to start an IV, right? So you don't want one of your EMTs, even though they can do it, you're probably trained on it, you're probably helping them become an EMTA or medic, so you're training it, but you don't want them doing that on scene with the patient, right? You don't want them doing anything outside of their scope of practice. You want to give this patient the best survival chances. And everybody knowing their roles, constantly training on their roles. And we did this again. This is something I'm just adopting from the fire department. We had our mannequins on the floor. Hey, this is the scenario. Somebody's drowning this. again, like you said at the beginning of this webinar, yes, this is almost an anomaly. We're not going to do this. I think this is the first time, actually, wow, this is the first time I ran a 911 call in my non-emergency career.
Well, knock on wood,
You know,
right?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Um, so yes, but so that just shows you, it doesn't happen often, but one time can make you a breacher.
Yep, 100%. Yeah, this is one of those things where anybody who's getting into this space, when I talk to them, when they're thinking about it, this is their biggest worry is, am I going to be dealing constantly with these situations that are like, life or death and really hard to deal with? And that's not the case. But at the same time, if you're getting into the medical space, inevitably there is going to be some time where you either have to deal with a life-threatening emergency or just emergency that is a level above what you're used to dealing with. And so the more you can prepare, the more you train your employees and have these, kind of worst case scenario plans and procedures written in stone where everybody knows what to do, then when something does happen, not only do you not have anything to worry about because your employees are going to carry it out, but more importantly, the patient that is at risk in one of these really serious situations is going to have the best chance of survival. So that is when you're thinking through all of this, like I really want everybody to both, on the one hand, not let this be the biggest worry about this space. But on the other hand, know that something like this could happen. And the biggest thing to do is just prepare. And when you're thinking about running and being successful in any business, one of your most important jobs as an owner is to prepare for contingencies and have the right plans in place if something goes wrong. You're always trying to kind of think about what could happen and make sure you're protecting the health of your investment and your business. And in this case, ultimately, you're also, and more importantly, protecting the health of your patient. So all that to say, it's not I don't think it's a difficult thing to plan and prepare for. The difficult thing is being consistent and making sure that you uphold that training and procedures, because a lot of people can kind of get lax after they do it the first time. They set the right foundation and forget to ever kind of follow up on their training. So remember that in a space like this, you should have trainings, you should have procedures, and you should make sure that on a regular basis, everybody knows what they should be doing in each of these situations.
I say two things. For everybody who's going to watch this webinar and is going to watch this in the future, yes, you definitely want to thank Josh because this was not on my agenda. But I think the great thing about what Josh and Rob Cantons are doing is no matter what, we want to give you guys all the scenarios, right? And you mentioned this. We want to prepare people for the worst, even though it might not happen. But you want mentors, you want people that are going to say, no, I'm going to show you the worst case scenarios and I want you to be successful. But the only way you can be successful is if you prepare for the worst and, you hope for the best, right? And I appreciate you, Josh, because this was like not the topic, but you were like, hey, this is important and people need to see all the aspects, even though they're not going to deal with it, right? And that's something that is to value when you're looking for guidance, that someone's not going to hide certain things from you or, just not really tell you everything. They're going to tell you they're good and maybe they're not so good. And another thing I want to tell people is don't let this overwhelm you because you can partner up with any fire department and say, hey, can I borrow one of your medics? Or can one of your medics train a group of my guys? And I guarantee you, you will not find a fire department to say no because they have the equipment. We love to teach. So if you're a private EMS company and there's a fire department that does EMS by your office, just ask them, hey, is there a time that you guys could teach us the basic BLS and how to respond to emergencies? Because they're the best people to ask, right? So if this seems overwhelming, just ask the fire department, and I guarantee you they will help.
Yep. Perfect. All right, Hans, I appreciate all your insight on this and for kind of helping talk through, what is a really difficult situation and how to be prepared for it. And for everybody watching, again, there are plenty of ways that you can reach out to us. We can help you whatever stage you are in the journey. If you're still early, we have content like this. We also have a free one-on-one on our website. And then if you're really trying to take that next step, we have in-person summits where you can come, meet with my team, meet with Hans, and really take that next step into the industry. Or if you're trying to just start your own, trying to get your feet off the ground, we can help you build and Hans can mentor you through whatever stage of the journey you're in. and help you be as successful as possible in this industry. Other than
Right.
that, everybody, thanks for being on here. Hans, thank you all as always for being here, and we will see everybody else next week.